Before we get into the details about AAC implementation, it's really important that we go over the theoretical underpinnings of what drives this implementation. This is really going over how we teach AAC, and that's ultimately what our goal is how we're going to be able to teach an individual or help an individual use AAC in their day-to-day environment. We've gone, and historically what we've done in our practice is we get contacted by a district or a family, and they tell us that, oh, we have a student coming in, or our student was just prescribed a certain AAC system, we need training. And so we readied ourselves and we put together a whole technical training and went in and talked about the device. And we've done this over and over and over again. And when we first started, we had pages of device and program specific trainings that we offered. And what we found that even though we were providing these trainings, our teams were still struggling to support AAC implementation and still struggling to figure out and design ways in which they could really help an individual actually use their system. So that really got us thinking and almost forced us, I think, to go back to our training and get a better sense of what makes successful communication. So as you know, we talked about it's a process between a sender and a receiver, and there's a shared message. But what we've also learned from gurus in our field, such as Janice Light, who in 1989 told us that in order to be a competent communicator using augmentative communication, we really have to look at it in 4 different ways. So she designed and talked about 4 communicative competencies. And so, thank you, Vanna. One is operational competency. And that's really the technical skills needed to operate and use a tool. The second one is linguistic competency. And that's understanding the language code of the AAC system. So what symbols do you put together? How do you combine them to make messages? How do you put them together? Or how are they organized so that you can retrieve specific vocabulary words? So that's our linguistic competency.
That's what our trainings before, and that's what we were focusing on going into the teams, and we were finding that just focusing on those 2 pieces, really, we weren't seeing success.
Right. So because what Janice Light has showed us is that there are actually really 2 more competencies that are more subtle and really important. And so those are social competencies. So really understanding how to communicate, who to communicate, about what to communicate, really that kind of the essence of communicating and sharing that message. And then there's also strategic competency. And that's how understanding how to use AAC given different barriers or barriers related to AAC use. So it's much, much slower to use AAC than it is for us to talk verbally, astronomically different in terms of rate of output. So you're contending with time, you're also contending with different opportunity barriers. So is a certain activity or environment conducive to using augmentative communication, and even thinking on the simplest level of taking a high-tech AAC system outside where the sun's glaring and you can't see anything. So really understanding how and when to use AAC given different barriers.
Wait, you're saying that this doesn't come naturally, just like our students were verbal and they're just communicating this, knowing how to do this, they need to be taught it.
Yeah, we need to go over it. And I think what we've found, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that we tend to, as Hillary mentioned, really focus on the first 2. So typically what happens is an individual has speech and language services pumped up on their grid, or they go to outpatient speech therapy so that there's a clinician working and really working on how do we use this device, how do we make these certain messages, how do we conjugate our verbs, how do we put things in the right word order. And so we really hone in on those two things. But then what happens is that there's this other stuff about how do we generalize those skills outside into our everyday environment. And so that really lends itself to that social and strategic competency. But wait, there's more. So in 2003, this kind of started a process where Light and her colleague David McNaughton got together, and then they have written a really great article about it later in 2014, where they really went in and they looked at, does this still apply? Is it, even given the major changes in AAC and the technical advancements, do these 4 communicative competencies still hold true? And they found that yes, they do, but that there is something even more powerful, or just as powerful, that needs to be considered, and that's an individual's motivation, their resilience, the attitude towards AAC. And we can both share countless examples of working with individuals who use AAC, and in our individual sessions rock it. They're just as good as you can get. And then they just, outside of our sessions, can't or don't want to use AAC because the environment isn't welcoming to it, or they're the only individual using AAC, or their communication partners are confused about how to do it. And it's really what becomes exciting for you guys and for us as well as professionals, is that there's the motivation and the attitude. Those are things that we can really change and we can really affect and impact. And so remember back to our iceberg, which we're going to delve into more, there's all this stuff that happens underneath the surface. And something that is just so important is about our attitude and supporting the individual's attitude towards AAC. And they need to want to do it. It's a verbal world, and they need to, it's really challenging to use AAC, and so they've got to really be motivated to do so.
Absolutely. And I think what we hear is a lot of times at our summer camp, we'll see some of our students and they're using their device like they're like no other, and different than what they're using in their school setting. And okay, is it because it's camp and we're fun and we're swimming and we're horseback riding?
True.
Could be part of it.
It's fun.
That motivational, that engagement part. But we also have the environment filled with visual supports. We have staff that's trained in the prompting hierarchy. We have individuals that are seeing other individuals using communication, and really focusing on this piece of it. And so how do we generalize, how do we bring camp to the school setting, to the home setting? And that's what we're going to kind of go through moving forward. And
I just have to add, I'm sorry, I know you don't like to tell this story, but one of my favorite things is being able to watch Hillary interact with the individuals with whom she works. And even watching when it's technology, it always breaks or something goes wrong. And just watching her attitude towards it, oh my goodness, oh I know, it's so frustrating, this isn't working, come, we're gonna figure this out together. And even that shift in attitude about addressing those frustrations in comparison to like, oh, this silly, it's broken again, here we go, just that alone really can change the way an individual feels about their system. So if we haven't emphasized it enough, this part, the motivation, the attitude, is just critically important.
All right, so let's take a look at this. I am so much better with pictures than just listening, so let's make this iceberg. So before we go, we're just going to review one more time. So Janice Light, operational, knowing how to use the device. This is what we usually focus on, right? Do they know how to turn it on? Can they adjust the volume? You know, you've seen this in an IEP and objectives. They're able to turn it on, they're able to adjust the volume. That's a great skill to have, and they do need it, but that's not communication. So what else do we need to add to it? So we talk about the linguistic understanding. Okay, well, they can navigate through their categories page and find vocabulary using carrier phrase. Again, really important, but we're still not there yet building that communication. So sometimes we do start to look at that social piece of it. How are they incorporating the communication? How are they incorporating AAC For greetings, oh yes, that's our favorite. For socials, for greetings, well, what about telling jokes? Telling on someone, commenting. Great side story, sorry, gonna add it in here. Recently added sound effects to one of my students' Prolo Coach Go boards. So we were practicing in a session where I'm talking about my loving children and how exciting they are. And this high school student, I'm like, oh, it looks like you're really not interested. This would be a great opportunity for you to hit the snore button. Huge smile on his face, uses the head switches, navigates, and is snoring. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's ridiculous. But I have to tell you one more thing about him. Start telling about my son again. He independently goes to that snore button one more time. Perfect. This is social. We need to focus on this. Strategic. If we don't know how to use or when to use or what strategies are going to work best, our students are going to have too many opportunities where they're not successful, and they're going to give up unless they're well supported. So this is another important piece. We need to model when we make a mistake on the device. How are we going to navigate back? This is important and does need to be taught.
Yep.
We've talked a lot about this. So let's see, what does this look like in that visual, this iceberg that we were talking about? So Narissa is the much better artist, so I'm going to let her kind of draw it up for us.
Thanks.
So we know that on the top is our AAC device. We know that this could be direct selection, it could be a switch scanner, Prolo Coach Go, any type of device. PRC, doesn't matter. We're going to talk about that implementation. What are those strategies? Let's see. Favorite one on top. Having fun, motivation must go on there. We need to make sure that we're engaging the student. If we're not engaged, we're not going to have that buy-in. We're not going to have that push. Think of something that you really don't want to do. You're not remembering it. I'm trying to think of a class and I can't pull one off the top of my head. Okay, so we have our engagement. Now we need to know, how do we prompt? How do we support that individual? So we have our prompting hierarchy that we need.
You keep on going, I got it.
Okay. See, she's much neater. We're going to talk about, we need to understand language development, right? We can't all of a sudden be working with a student and skipping our language development. Just because you use AAC doesn't mean you start out with complete sentences, I want the blue crayon. We need to follow our triadic language development in there. Triadic, ooh, interesting word. So triadic means three. When we're talking about AAC, there's three individuals, the communication partner, the device. We're going to talk more about that later. We talked about it at camp, we talked about it as success. Engineer that environment. Make sure that we have those visual supports that make it so students can communicate anywhere, anytime. So that's really important. Beautiful job, Narissa.
Thanks.
Another big thing that you're going to hear us say multiple times in this training, AAC modeling. We're not going to have success if the only person using AAC is the individual. We need to make sure that we're modeling and following that implementation.
You like that?
It's beautiful, beautiful. All right, so we have the device. Technology, as Narissa shared, does not always work. So we need to make sure we have Lite-Tech. Lite-Tech for backup, Lite-Tech for expansion, accessing maybe some of that fringe vocabulary.
All stuff we're going to talk about.
Right. One of my least favorite things, but is really, really important, is data collection. We need to make sure that what we're doing is working, and we can't base that off of, yeah, everything's great, they're doing good. We need to have specific data collection for that. Last but not least is vocabulary inventory. We need to know what vocabulary, what do we need?
And also inventorying the individual's communication methods, not just AAC.
Exactly.
So we're going to flesh all of this out in our coming units. And again, we're going to talk back and go back to our iceberg and this is what we're going to go over. We are confident that these tools, strategies, systems, and processes help with this.